Hello, everyone. Oh my goodness, you're all so prompt. I thought I was going to be the first one here. Let's just check that you can hear me first of all. Moses says hi. Let me know. Just type in the box that you can hear me first before we do anything else. Sorry about last week, guys. Something unavoidable. I think Katie told you we had some work being done outside our property and somebody cuts the power lines. We were without electricity for a full 24 hours. It was a nightmare. It was actually freezing. We had to even go off and console ourselves and go to the pub because it was too cold in the house. There was no lighting. There was nothing we could do. And really, so so it didn't turn out too bad in the end, but I can tell you honestly, I spent the night in the pub and the next day in the coffee place until they could actually get it sorted. But anyway, we get there in the end. So you can all hear me loud and clear. Perfect. We have a lot to get through. I've had a few questions in from you ahead of time, so I know one or two things that I want to cover. But even then, I've still got a lot to cover. I don't think I'm going to get everything covered within the webinar, so we'll see how we do. I've just kind of selected the main sections. So what I really want to do, Shirley says I cannot hear anything. Okay, just let me type into Shirley so she can see. Shirley, everyone else can hear. Will you, bear with me for 1 second, guys. Will you check your audio settings? Okay, so we are on walls and partitions. And what I'm really going to do in this webinar, more than anything else, is concentrate on going through the construction and design of walls, because that's where you kind of really will need to go. I'm not going to go through the functional requirements because, in all honesty, they're covered in the lesson in the PDF. So you do need to always go through the PDF lesson. You know that. And I prefer to kind of like stick to the real stuff so that you have a firm understanding and also that you can be a little bit inspired about what you can do. And then I'll just talk you through the assignment as well. So let me just check my room here and see who else is here. Pavlina, nice to see you on. Okay, right. Well, listen, let's get started because we've got loads to get through. And obviously we fell behind a week. And just to let you know as well, I'm up to date with all my grading, everything that's been done apart from one or two projects that come in. They always take longer, but all of the assignments are graded. Everything that I've received is up to date and graded. So if there's anything that you think is outstanding, please do let me know because as far as to my knowledge, I have everything completely up to date and I just want to make sure that I haven't missed anything. It's always good to check. Okay, so basically, walls and partitions. Let me just bring up my slide again. And here we go. Okay, when you look at one empty room, it looks pretty much the same as another. And these are regular, typical walls. Moses asks, when will your project be marked? It'll probably take about 2 weeks, Moses, altogether, because it has to be double graded by myself and somebody else as well. So probably about 2 weeks. Might be done sooner, but I prefer to err on the side of caution. As it is, we kind of rush it through because usually with most home study students, they take up to 6 weeks just because of the process that has to go on in the background. We'll get it done as quickly as we can. So yeah, look, one empty room looks pretty much the same as another. And basically, these are your typical walls before any decoration. And why is that? Well, the reason is if you look at most layouts, they're made with straight walls. So whether it's residential or commercial, pretty much the designs that we see 99.9% of the time are made using straight walls. But it doesn't have to be that way. And this is exactly what we're going to cover in the lesson and show you how to do different things. So what I've done is I've divided the lesson up into two parts. So regular walls and irregular walls. So regular walls are your normal straight walls, these types of things that you're typically seeing. And then we'll look at the construction of them. and how you can put them together. And then we will take a look at irregular walls. And then we'll finish off looking at some of the demountable and movable walls as well. So like the flexible systems. So there's two types of walls. Oh, and just to say to you as well, just to give you a definition, people always get, the words walls and partitions are used interchangeably. In the construction industry, a non-load bearing wall is often called a partition or a partition wall. And for that reason, builders will often talk about, we'll put a partition here. And what they actually mean is a wall, but it's just a non-load bearing wall. So for the purposes of what we're discussing here, and for the purpose of you learning about this as well, we'll always talk about a wall that is a structure. A wall is something that is built and that becomes part of the fabric of the building, whether or not it's load bearing. As far as we're concerned, that's what a wall is. Partitions and dividers are things that don't become part of the structure of the building. They are flexible. They can be moved, relatively easy. So we'll take a look at them afterwards. So this first section is all about walls. In fact, most of this webinar is going to be about walls. So load-bearing walls are generally, not always, but generally made of masonry, which is either brick or stone. Now, these are outside of the remit of the interior designer. These are usually constructed at the time of the building because, as you know, you need a foundation for a wall to support the weight of it. And so all of these things are taken into account when the whole entire building is being designed. So generally speaking, you are not going to put in a load-bearing wall. You may remove one, but you're not going to construct a load-bearing wall. And generally speaking, most of the kind of masonry walls that you will see that are made of either brick or natural stone are load-bearing. Now, it's worth just being aware. This is where materials and construction cross over a little bit. I try and keep them separate just so that, we don't go down a rabbit hole with each lesson, and so that basically we, puts it into bite-sized pieces. But at the same time, one thing that's valid, I'll go over. So, I'm sure you've already looked at before different types of cladding, and we'll cover these in the next lesson. We're going to talk about wood and stone, and we'll be covering all of these types of things, masonry. And there are a lot of veneers you can buy. Like this is a brick veneer, which is basically just a mock brick, but some of them are amazing. You really wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but they're lightweight. This is an example here from a showroom where basically you just, they've just got a range of examples, and when they're put into place, they can look very, very authentic. Just a quick question, guys. When I move my mouse on the screen, can you see it? Do you just see the presentation, the slideshow, or do you actually see my mouse moving as well? I'm just curious because I'm moving my mouse to point to things, and it'll just be helpful. I just thought about this earlier, but Pavlina says, yes, we can. Okay, thank you. That's very good. See the mouse. Thank you. Okay. So generally speaking, masonry walls are not something that you are going to install. Now, there are a lot of new products at the moment, and there are some things coming onto the market being used, which are kind of like lightweight blocks that can be used to construct walls. Generally speaking, we don't tend to use them in interior design. The most common wall that you're going to be working with is stud partition, which we'll look at in a moment. However, just be aware of these, and it might be worth, again, as you're working with, I wouldn't even say that you need to investigate these at the moment. There's no need for you to. To be honest with you, I've never worked with them. I've never. However, if you could end up doing a job where you're working with a builder who ends up using this type of wall construction. They favor this kind of wall construction. So, just be aware of it, and it could be something then that you can investigate at the time. So there's pros and cons to these types of things, but really these are actually, even though they look like a masonry wall, they're made with a very hollow construction. They're quite lightweight, and they can be installed without having a foundation. So here you're looking at a wall. It looks like a solid masonry wall, but this is something that can be installed without a foundation, and it has the feel and the appearance of a masonry wall, and it kind of gives it that weight, visual weight, should I say, more than physical weight. And so there are some things like that. This is another thing I just found online here. I was looking for images, and this is a product image, a company called Elomatic, where they produce these types of walls here. And so they just showed this. These seem to be widely used in India at the moment. Now, the disadvantage is that it's much more difficult to integrate services. And that's what we'll talk about now in just a moment. So this is the most common type of wall that we are going to be using, okay? And this is what your typical wall is built from. It's called a stud partition wall. And basically, it's a frame, okay? Traditionally, it's always been made of wood. So a carpenter would need to install this framework here. And then the finish, a plasterboard finish, will be applied on top of it. So here's another example just to show you. Again, you're used to looking at buildings when they're finished. You don't really see underneath them. So for many of you, or for some of you, this may be the first time that you're actually getting to see the actual structure. So I kind of had a look around to try and find images that would really kind of like show all of this. But basically, you can see here very clearly, it's just a wooden frame. And the beauty about this is that you can see there's a thickness here. There's a depth to the wall. And on either side, you'll apply plasterboard. And this gives a cavity within the wall, and that's where we can hide all our services. So here, this is electrical wiring. You can see that we've got the basics of electrics in there. And you cannot do that with a solid construction wall. Either you have to channel out a part of the wall, or you have to fix them to the surface. It's going to be one or the other. So again, here's just a little bit of a more close-up detail. So again, these are just the wires inside here, and then these are the electrical boxes. Now, another thing you'll notice as we get to the lesson on services, I'll talk about first fix and second fix, but I should mention it now. Obviously, things have to be done in stages when a building is being built. So, the first thing that would be done would be for the frame to be built. Then an electrician would come in and install the wiring. Then a plasterer would come in and install the gypsum boards and plaster them. And then the electrician would come back and install the actual electrical sockets. So they have to work around each other. That's why as we get on into the course, we'll talk about scheduling, how you coordinate the different people. And this is also what we call first fix and second fix. So your contractor, your electrical contractor, will need to be there, first of all, for a first fix. And the first fix is literally just putting in the electrics, okay? Just putting in the wires, putting everything in place where it needs to be. Oh, that's interesting, Mira. Mira says in the Lebanon, we use mostly masonry walls, plastered and painted, not load-bearing walls. Okay, that's really interesting. You see, we don't do that at all. In the UK, I know that they're widely used in India as well, the load-bearing walls, but honestly, the most of the walls here in Ireland, where I'm from, in the UK, and in a lot of places, I've done a few things in Europe as well, and it's always been with a stud partition wall, whether that's made with timber or steel. We'll have a look at the steels afterwards. So it is interesting. Either way, the construction method is still basically the same. The fundamentals, are going to apply to all of these, except for the fact that it's a little bit more difficult for you to house your services within them. Now, just should mention here as well, I do know that obviously with these hollow walls, the hollow masonry walls, obviously the electrical wire can be run through the hollow, but that will be something that you would need to investigate as to how you would do that. But either way, you're always going to have to make sure that you know exactly where you want your fittings installed, so that they can be done before the structural finishes are put into place. So I really want you to just see how everything is kind of going to fit in together. So again, look, there's no great mystery here. The only mystery is that you don't see this usually because it's always hidden when you go into a building. But I mean, if you look at this, I mean, it's very unattractive. But there's the wires; they're stapled, secured to the stud here. This is the vertical timber here. We call this a stud. That's why they call stud walls. They run into the socket, and that's it. And it doesn't look nice, doesn't look tidy, but that's exactly the purpose, because it will be hidden afterwards. And then here's another example where something is just coming down from the ceiling. But again, it's just showing you the way everything is integrated within the wall. So plumbing is also hidden. So again, this is why it's important to get the layout right and to understand as we go through the lessons when we talk about services, how you hide your services, because all of these things are usually hidden within the walls. Okay. And again here, like we've got a waste pipe here. We've got a water pipe here. Radiators. We have a lot of radiators in the British Isles for our heating systems. We don't generally, certainly not homes, would very, very rarely have an air conditioning system because it just doesn't get that hot usually. And generally speaking, we focus more on our heating systems. And radiators take up wall space. In the US, I know they have a lot of hot air conditioning systems. In Europe, it varies between the two. So again, but all of these things have to be planned, located, and then the pipe work, the duct work, all of those things need to be concealed within your walls as well. So this is all part of your planning process. Now, another thing that we'll put into, I'm just reading that. Sorry, I saw two messages there. Jay, in MRU, plaster is slowly coming onto the market, but all buildings are mainly constructed with concrete. Even internal walls are made with blocks. Okay, interesting. Okay, we'll talk about that afterwards as well. This is something called blocking. Generally speaking, again, there are different terms in different countries. There's little colloquialisms. Generally speaking, on a building site, we tend to call it grounds. And what you want to do, if you want to fix something heavy to a wall, it needs to be able to support it because the plasterboard isn't going to be strong enough. So if you're going to fix something heavy to a wall, you need to put in these kind of blocks which are inserted in between the timber so that they can support heavy weight, basically. And a building contractor will usually call these grounds. They'll say to me, have you got your drawings for your grounds? Where your grounds going to be? And again, it is known as blocking, but there are little colloquialisms. So once your framework is done, then a plasterboard is fitted onto it. It's either nailed or screwed onto the framework. And basically, your plasterboard is just sold in sheets. Okay, this is what it looks like when it comes to the site. So it literally is just attached to the wall, and you can see then that there's going to be this cavity behind. So it's either screwed or nailed, and it is, the different pieces are butted up against each other. So basically, you can see here that this is showing the cavity. You can see the space in between, and here we already have insulation. So we'll take a look at this now in just a moment. And again, here's another example just to show you exactly what it does look like. Do they block sound transmission? No, we'll go over that in a moment. Okay, well, look, let's do it now. This is the purpose of any wall. Walls have a number of purposes, okay? And one of them is to help prevent the spread of noise. You may want privacy for, if you're designing an office, you may want a boardroom that, where sound doesn't travel. So there can be very private conversations, all of those types of things. So generally speaking, if you have a completely hollow wall, okay, it's not going to be that good at blocking sound. However, you can add insulation. Insulation is very good for that. You can buy boards that will cover this in the lesson on materials. There are different types of plasterboards that you can purchase. Some of them are fire retardant. Some of them are more suitable for water. areas of high condensation, such as bathrooms. And there are also some with, stronger sound proofing abilities. Another thing is the insulation. Insulation will absolutely help to retain heat, but it can also help to prevent the travel of sound as well. So, a lot of the time in homes, these are where the shortcuts are taken, because you don't see these things. So very often, a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want stud walls because the sound travels." But in all honesty, you can actually have them really well insulated, and they block sound quite a lot. But when a builder is, constructing a series of houses, people make a judgment about whether or not to buy. They come in and they look at the building, and they look at the layout, they look at the structure. They don't see these things. And these things are actually what puts up the building cost. But obviously it makes for a more comfortable environment. And as an interior designer, you're dealing with people who care about their environment. They usually want, to have a good quality interior. So all of these things will become important to them. So again, but another thing about it as well is, if you're going to be installing something like this on site, you also need to make sure that you either have someone very reliable that you trust to monitor that this is being done, or you're there yourself on site to make sure that it's being done. Because again, as I said, once the plasterboard is in place, you can't see what's behind it. And it is a way for some contractors to cut corners and save some money as well. So insulation is, generally speaking, what they will do is they'll apply the plasterboard to one side, put the insulation in, and then they'll apply the plasterboard to the other side. But there is, some quite hard insulation that's quite, you can see it, you hold it like this, it's quite solid, and it can just be inserted directly into the wall before the plasterboard has been applied to it. So when the plasterboard is applied, they will then cut out the holes. As they fix it, they'll cut out the holes for the different sockets, outlets to water pipes, etc. Now, another thing about it is, if you look at this is a cross section of a stud wall. So you can see here with this hollow, the plaster, if you put anything of weight on here, the plaster is not really going to be strong enough. Now, there are special fixings you can get for plasterboard walls, special screws that are supposed to hold heavy weights. But you know what? They won't hold really heavy weights. They will only do so much. And this is exactly why I was showing you this earlier on. If you are going to use this type of wall, which you probably will quite a lot, you do need to make sure that if you want to put in heavy items, that you provide some type of blocking work or blocking diagram, so that the walls can be strengthened to support, whether it be heavy pictures, heavy mirrors, cabinets, etc. Okay. So once the plasterboard is on, this is plasterboard that's been screwed in place. You've got all these different size sheets. They're one size, and you cut them to size literally to fit the wall space. But they're butted up against each other. But at the same time, it's still quite an uneven surface. So what they need to do is finish it off and make sure that the whole thing is smooth and completely level. So what they'll do is they'll pull through the wires, pull through any pipes, etc., make sure that there's access to them. Okay. And this is another thing. It's just worth mentioning at this point as well. If I'm doing something like electrical, and I'm not sure, say, what distance I want the lights to be at, I'll always make sure that they provide me extra wire. I'll specify, a meter of this from the ceiling height, because at least then I have the flexibility. Simple things. We'll cover this as we go along, but just making sure it's better to have too much than too little. Total thickness of plasterboard walls, usually internal walls, are about 100 mils. Okay, it's 100 mils in total. That's the thickness of the stud wall with the plasterboards on either side as well. As a general rule, Exterior walls are usually 300 mils, and internal walls are 100 mils. So with the plaster, how did they finish it off? Okay, they do this at corners. They put these are galvanized steel corner edges. Okay, and they're just kind of like screwed or nailed to the edge, and they give a really clear square edge. And because they're metal as well, they give it additional strength. And then where the joints are, where the boards butt up against each other, they cover it with jointing tape, and then they cover it with a jointing compound. So that gives you a smooth finish. Now, generally speaking, so this is something where it has been actually, the boards, you can see there, all the joints have been covered, and it's been gone over with a jointing finish as well. So it's quite smooth. You can see your electrical wires sticking through there as well. Generally speaking, I have another one there as well. So again, this is kind of like, so the basic construction there is in place. Generally speaking, you'll do a skim coat of plaster as well over that. And if you look at some of the DIY manuals and some of the things online, they'll say that you can, you don't necessarily have to do that. If you do if you apply the joint tape and you cover the joints correctly, that it's not necessary. But I would always do a skim coat of plaster over. It just gives a perfectly smooth finish, and also it's a much better finish for other, applications to adhere to. So if you think about it, plasterboard is actually covered in a very thick paper, for want of a better description. And if you apply, say, a wallpaper to that, when you go to pull that wallpaper off in the future, it could actually damage some of the plasterboard by peeling that away. So I would always just make sure that I have a skim plaster finish as well. It just gives it that extra strength, and it gives you more flexibility there in the future as well. So you'll see a few different diagrams. Now, another thing as well, just worth mentioning, is that there's some DIY jobs. You'll find a lot of things online and about things that you can do yourself. Plastering is one that you absolutely cannot do yourself, ever. And I would always make sure, if you're working with a new plasterer, go and see their work. Go and see their work when it's been finished and when it's been painted, after it's been decorated. Because very often you can't tell, when surfaces have just been freshly plastered, you can't tell. It's only when they've been painted that you can see if there's an uneven surface, etc. So just always make sure that if you're working with someone new, that you go and check their work out first. That's really important. So the type of wall frame that we looked at there was the timber stud partition, okay, and that's been the most commonly and the most widely used, certainly in the British Isles and a lot of Europe as well. Something that you'll also is a metal stud partition, and basically these are, it's exactly the same thing, only it's made with these lightweight metal places. This is basically a lightweight steel frame. The pieces are cut to size and put into place in exactly the same way. Now, generally speaking, these started in commercial interiors. They were used a lot in commercial interiors. You don't see them that often in residential interiors, but they are being used. And if I'm doing any kind of remodeling or renovation, I've put them in a few times because they're quick, they're easy. The plastering contractors that I've worked with that do a lot of commercial work, they're used to doing these. The benefit of this as well is that these can be installed very, very quickly. So the plastering contractor, you'll just be dealing with one contractor who will install the frame, and then they'll apply the plasterboard themselves. Whereas if you're going to do a timber stud wall, you'll usually have to get a carpenter in to make the frame. Then your plasterer will come in and apply the plasterboard, etc. Whereas with these ones, these are very quick and easy to erect, and the plaster contractor, the plastering contractor, will usually do this as well. So it does kind of like, save a little bit of hassle on site. And again, it can actually also reduce the cost because these are much quicker and easier to install. The labor is much less intensive. The cost of the actual product isn't a huge difference, but the time scale makes a big difference, and all of these impact on your cost as well. So it's exactly the same. The plasterboard is applied to it, and again, this is just to kind of show you as well. So it looks exactly the same way. So those are regular walls. That is basically how regular walls are constructed. And 99.9% of walls are constructed that way. Now, as I said, if you are in a different country, you'll need to look into, what is the standard in your Mira. I know that you're thinking about moving to Canada. They'll be working with stud partition walls in Canada more than anything else. However, if you want to do any type of renovation where you are at the moment, it would be worth investigating how services are concealed and housed within those type of wall constructions. But again, if they're widely used, you'll have no problem getting access to information on those types of things as well. So those are regular walls, and what we're going to look at now are irregular walls that are a little bit different. Okay, so this is an irregular wall because basically it's not flat straight. Now, if you look at this, and I hope now that you already have some understanding of how a wall is constructed, that you can also already start to figure out how something like this is constructed. Okay. And the only difference is that obviously there's going to be a frame. So, if a wall is made by making a frame and then attaching the finish to the frame, the finish usually being plasterboard, in order to do something like this, you just have a different shape frame. And I'm sure you can appreciate that, something like this, even though it looks quite striking, is quite different. And it might look a little bit more complex. At the end of the day, it's not really going to be rocket science to do. Now, I will say to you that anytime that you want to do something even a little bit different, you may have difficulty with some builders because as I said, 99.9% are typical flat, straight walls. And a lot of builders just like to do what they do, get in, get out, get paid, and that's it. And they will, just not be amenable to doing something that's a little bit different. But if that's the case, you just, don't work with them, and you may work with them on certain jobs, and you will find as you go along and as you start to build your team, which will take some time. But as you do start to build your team, you'll find that you use some contractors for straight run-of-the-mill work, and that you use specialist contractors, for when you're doing the special stuff. You'll also find that the contractors who are really willing to take pride in their work and do something a little bit different, they tend to charge more. So very often you can end up kind of, mixing the two together as a way to, spread your budget as well. But I'm going off track here. So let me come back to this again. So I hope you can already see how something like this can be done. Okay, so if you look at this, there's going to be a framework behind that with angles. But this could very easily be constructed. I'm sure you can visualize the type of wooden frame that would be behind this. And then you've just got the plasterboard applied to it, and then to these surfaces here as well. Okay. So again, these are just some nice examples I found, and I thought they were quite inspiring about, again, what a striking different effect is achieved by just making some variations. Now, these are obviously load-bearing walls. When I say obviously, I would assume, this isn't designed by an architect, but again, this is something, if you're involved in the stage where somebody is building a new home, these are the times when you can actually work with an architect to design something like this. And again, if you were dealing with an open plan interior, it could be possible that you could put something in like this with a non-load bearing wall as well. But again, just look at the difference. Before we've even decorated, before we've done anything else, already there's a really striking feature here. So again, these are just a few different angles from the same property. This is another one. Again, this won an architectural award, but it's just so different. So I just wanted to show you some inspiration, and you can start to see how can things be done a little bit differently. So how do you build these irregular walls? Well, I mean, most of them are relatively, straightforward. This one here, is obviously, if these are load bearing walls, they're going to be, you're going to have to work with an architect who will design them. But there are other things. So let's look at this one here. Okay, we've got this little area here at the back. This looks like a room here that's been created with this kind of partition wall. So basically, here is the drawing of how this wall is designed. Shirley says, what constitutes a load-bearing internal wall? A load-bearing wall is exactly as it sounds. A load-bearing wall bears the load from above. It is an important part of the building structure. The building has been designed with this wall, and that wall cannot be removed, because if it is removed, it will damage the integrity of the building, the integrity of the structure. Now, you can remove it and put a beam in place, or an RSJ, what we call a reinforced steel joint. However, you will have to make sure that precautions are taken. You let's put it this way: you can't simply take out a load-bearing wall. And if you are ever working with that type of thing, and you want to remove a wall, and if you're in any way unsure, you will have to go and talk to a structural engineer. Now, generally speaking, the local planning offices will be able to help you, because, again, regulations change so much between different regions. And the local planning office, buildings within a particular region, which is, and this is the thing about interior design, most of the time you're going to be operating within a specific region. Are generally conform to certain building standards. There are building regulations in place for a particular region. So your first port of call always is to go to the planning office, and they'll be able to help you. First of all, they'll be able to tell you what the regulations are that you need to abide by. And lots of the time, they'll actually have details of the plans of any building that you're looking at to renovate, or if there's houses in an area, like if there's a group of houses, they will generally have details of them that they can say to you, okay, look, all of these houses were designed like this. These are not load-bearing walls. So you can go ahead and make changes, or they'll say, no, these are load-bearing walls. You'll need to consult with a structural engineer. Okay, so you cannot touch a load-bearing wall without consulting with the structural engineer. You can design the layout, you can come up with the design that you want, but the design of the components have to be carried out and calculated by a structural engineer. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So look, how do we do this irregular room? Well, basically you build your framework. Okay, here's the drawing. So there's a framework. The same, it's irregular, but it still is a framework. Although it has an odd shape, you can still see how something like this could be constructed. So here's a cross section of it. Then here it is being executed. So again, we've got, all of the vertical members will be there, and then they've just got these kind of sheets, pieces of plywood that are cut and put into place. And here's a detail here. So, anytime you want something like this, this is all you do to it. So it's not rocket science. It's not easy. It's not easy to actually get something like this done, because first of all, yes, you do have to design it. You have to come up, if you want to do something like this, you have to come up with the precise measurements of how it's going to be done. Don't take it for granted that a contractor is going to know how to do this. You might be lucky and get a very, very good builder who's able to kind of put his hand to anything. But I can tell you now, they're few and far between. And generally speaking, you'll need to kind of specify all of this. So it's an easy option for sure. But at the same time, it's not rocket science. In the same way that you kind of put all the pieces together to create something made of Lego when you're a kid, this is the same thing. And these lessons are really about kind of unveiling the mystery so that you can see how to do these things yourself. So again, here's another, I just wanted to find some images that would really kind of like inspire you. And again, just look at here, a difference that has been made. This is irregular as well. And at the end of the day, again, you've just got this curve here. Now, this is in itself is the opening. Let's face it, you're not going to, privacy can't isn't going to be of major concern here because there's no doors here, etc. But I just want you to start to see different things. Now, what types of materials these being made of as well. In some of your feedback, some of you have said to me, "Oh, what is this constructed of? What is that constructed of?" I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I'm looking at this drawing here, or sorry, at this image here, and I don't know what this has been constructed of. I would hazard a guess that this has been constructed of, this has been done with a plywood frame. Because it looks quite thin. It looks too thin to be a stud wall. So this looks to me like it's been done with some type of plywood. But in all honesty, I can't tell you. Yeah, it says plywood. And the thing about it is, this is exactly what you need to do. Start looking, investigating, asking questions. You don't need to know everything about everything. And in fact, you are never going to know everything about everything. But when you see something that's a little bit different and you think, oh, I'd like to do that, start to figure out how you could do that. Sometimes in some of the good magazines, some of the high-end architectural magazines or websites, they'll actually explain how something is done. And then once you find something, then you can adapt it then for something else. But generally speaking, it's not even for, it's not for me to tell you these things, because you need to start investigating these things yourself. And also, I don't know half of these things. Some of these things, if I wanted to do something like this now, I've never done something like this, to be honest with you, but I'd just start investigating it and working it out. How would I do that? But I just wanted to show you things that would inspire you. And so you can actually see that these things are achievable as well. Different ways to kind of like accomplish things. And here's something similar. Again, very, very similar effects. And they've even incorporated these kind of like little doors, more like gates really here as well. Again, this really does look like, I would say that this is like a plywood frame here as well. Now, curved walls. Next, we're going to look at. Now, the thing about these types of things is that you tend to see these more so in interior design magazines than you do in practice, or in the flesh, should I say, in everyday environments. Why is that? So we're going to show you why. And then the other thing about it is you do tend to see a lot of them in commercial spaces, but it's only because, as I said, there are a lot of contractors who just want to do straight run-of-the-mill things, and there are a lot of designers and building designers who just do straight run-of-the-mill things as well. However, when you are renovating or designing a layout, you can do whatever you want, and curved walls and details like this are a really nice way, to lead someone through an interior. It's particularly in commercial interiors, and also in minimal interiors, where basically there's very little decoration. You can really use the structure to create something that's striking in itself as well. So this is another one here. I just really wanted to show you this because I just thought, look at the way here as well, the ceiling. We'll get onto ceilings in a later lesson, but the ceiling obviously, is part of this entire detail, with this kind of like lighting, this indirect lighting that's coming down from there as well. But you've got these curved walls and then the ceiling as well. It just visually leads your eye around. And then as well, as I said, this creates a circulation space which actually draws people into certain areas as well. So you see less curved walls are not that common in residential interiors, but they are still there. Again, this is a very classic interior here. Obviously, this would be part of the structure. But even sometimes small details, if you're putting up, small partition walls, just even curving details can make a huge difference, and a huge difference in visual impact as well. Moses has said, would these not be load-bearing walls? No, Moses, not necessarily. And I think, Moses, you're talking about these walls here. These would not necessarily be load-bearing walls. No. No, not at all. And the thing about it is, if you think about it, right, if you look at a building like a huge office block, where you go in and you've got this huge office area, how would you break up the space? You could do something like this. So I'm going to show you how these are constructed now in just a moment. But and things like this you can also use to disguise structural components. Like, let's say, for example, you have this large open plan office that's been constructed. It's a huge expanse, and every now and again it has pillars, supporting pillars, because there needs to be some supporting pillars in place. Something like this would not only create a really striking design feature, but it would be a way also to disguise some of those details and components that aren't ordinarily the most attractive. I think sometimes if you're creative, obstacles can turn into really, really fantastic opportunities for design by, planning around them as well. So back to our residential design, again, there's areas here. And again, these are both very classic interiors, kind of like neoclassical style here. But at the same time, it also works very well in a modern contemporary interior here as well. Now, this looks pretty much like a freestanding wall for the most part, but you can also see that there are some anchors here that are actually holding this, and they're fixed into the ceiling above as well. So one thing just to be aware of is that if you are going to put curved walls into any place, you do need to think about what is going to be on the side of the walls. So here we've got a curved seating area. Now, something like this is quite easy to get done. It's not that expensive. It's not going to break the bank. However, if you want to do a curved wall in a kitchen, and you're looking at, say, this is going to be one, and you want to have curved kitchen cabinets all the way around, that's going to be a huge expense. So just little things like that, be practical, or certainly think about those things. It's not to say that they won't be appropriate for you, but you just need to take into consideration. And again, this is a really nice idea. This looks like a hotel suite, whereby basically, one area is separated completely, but it's still part of the one room. So, and again, here's just another idea for really, again, making a real interior design feature out of the structure. So here, not only they've created the walls, but they've created all of these kind of like inset details as well. They've used an extra thick wall, so they've obviously built a frame that's wider and been able to use the wall itself as the structure as well. So not only is it a decorative detail, it's providing functional storage as well. So how do you do curved walls? Well, basically they're the same, as in they are just done with a framework. So a framework is made and constructed in exactly the same way, only it's done with curves instead. So here's a picture of one done in place with using the metal stud partition. Now, I couldn't find an image online of one done with a timber stud, but they can be easily done with any. The only thing about the metal stud is it's much more flexible. It lends itself more to these types of things as well. And basically, once the framework is put into place, exactly the same as before, then the plasterboard is applied to it. Now, I'm going to talk to you about plasterboard and how you bend it in just a moment. Here is another example of, again, just a slightly curved wall. The plasterboard is on one side. And another thing about the metal stud partitions as well is that there's a lot of different products available. And while any metal stud can easily be used to create curved walls. They can just be notches made into them, and they can quite easily be curved. There are products available that really lend themselves to this. So again, a lot of these will be provided when you would get with a really good building contractor and a really good plastering company. They will usually kind of like supply and fit and do all of these things as well. So you will so they'll help you out a lot. But again, another thing as well, this is where it overlaps into materials. We'll talk in the next lesson about wood and stone. We'll talk about gypsum as well and plaster. Each country usually has a main board which represents kind of gypsum products in that country, and it, most countries have one main brand or company that dominates the market, and they are the ones who kind of produce all of these different products and materials. So once you kind of look up what's relevant in your country, your locality, you'll get a lot of this information from them, from their websites. There is a lot of technical information that you have to wade through, but generally speaking, you will just find the stuff that's really relevant to you, and being able to give you the creative possibilities. How do you work out measurements when drawing up curved walls? The same as any other way. You just work out, what do I want? You have to work out the radius of it, the size of it, and you just have to clearly dimension where you want something to be. It's all about measuring. So you'll work out your layout, and then you decide how your wall is going to be. And once you can just show very clear instructions on a plan, well, then that will show everything then how it's going to be in real life. So your plasterboard is straight. Okay, so how do you apply it to a curved wall? There's two ways. What they do is they score it, first of all. This was the way that has always been in the past. And basically, they'll just, the contractor will score a straight line in the plasterboard, and they'll do it at regular intervals so that they can bend it slightly. And when they cover it with a skim coat, it will just give a nice curve. Now, you can still do this for if you're just having one corner here and there, something like that as well. But there are now flexible plasterboards as well that can be completely bent, and these have been specifically produced for this purpose. So as I said, when we get into materials, we'll have a look at them. But it makes these things much more widely available, and these designs are realistic for you to be able to do and achieve for your clients as well. So again, these are fixed in exactly the same way. It's just fixed to the wall and, coated then afterwards as well. And just one other thing is, another way that you can create a curved wall is by using a specific type of material. So here we talked about the, plasterboard wall, but again, any wall can be created using a specific type of material. Now in here, this example, it's, this is just a timber, but it's solid timber. And the other thing about this is, remember that, this is going to be a heavy construction, a heavy load. It can only go into a building that would be able to support it. Now, some high-rise buildings that would have very, very strong structures would be able to support something like this, but it's not something that you would be put into an average house, because it would need a foundation. It would need a foundation to support something like this. So I just thought it was something to put in there as well. A couple of other things to think about when you are doing curved walls is the openings. Again, having openings, without windows and doors is the easiest thing to get curved details. They can be done, but again, they're bespoke and they will be more expensive as well. So just take into account these types of things. And then another thing here is just combining and mixing different materials. Excuse me for one moment. I'm just going to pause my mic and clear my throat. Now, so we look at some of the products that come with systems, but again, just mixing and matching here. So just do think about things like that as well. How are things going to go up against it? And if you're going to have openings such as windows and doors, do you need to have a door that actually closes, because if that's something that's going to be made to order, bespoke as well, that's going to add to the complexity of the project as well. Now, another instantly get curved walls is with partitioning systems. Now, this is again this is the difference when I was talking earlier about walls and partitions. Everything we've looked at so far has been walls. This is a partitioning system, and basically there are a lot of office fit out companies. You'll find product manufacturers online, but also office fit out companies who will supply and fit everything for an office, including the actual structural layout, these kind of partition systems and the furniture. Not sure if you mentioned this, but in bathrooms you use waterproof plaster for these walls. Yes, I didn't mention it. We're going to talk to that about materials. When we get to materials, we'll talk about that. Well, the next lesson is on wood and stone. And when it should be wood masonry, really. So in that we will talk about gypsum and plaster finish, different types of plaster finishes. I'm just trying to limit this to really the kind of overall layout design of walls, not so much the actual finishes. So it's a good question, Mira, but I'm deliberately not going down, because in all honesty, we could go down a rabbit hole with any one of these lessons. There's so much to them. So this is a partitioning system, okay? And this is basically something that's prefabricated that you buy and fit into place. And they have them in all different types of shapes and sizes. And what's nice about these as well is that they also have all of the components that will work and fit within these. So you're looking at your doors, etc. as well. These products are available in different colors. We'll have a look at these more in a few minutes. But again, this is just to show you, with your doing with commercial interiors, if you are going to use any kind of partitioning system, a lot of them are already pre-designed. Now you are limited, obviously, if you're using something that's pre-designed, you're usually limited to certain configurations that are available, but you can do some wonderful things with that as well. Oh, and this is just one last one as well here. Again, just to start to show you as well. I mean, here you can see, look, the whole ceiling wraps around. It continues into the wall system. And again, just make something different. Now, you do see more of these in commercial interiors, but there's nothing to stop you using these in residential interiors or adapting the ideas. The only thing about these is when you're buying these prefabricated systems, generally speaking, they do look commercial. They look kind of like an office interior. So, you need to be careful. But again, you can take inspiration from everywhere and do a million things. And again, here's another system. Something like this would be, again, this could either be prefabricated, so that you're buying a system. I imagine it is, or it is something, if you wanted to do something like this that was completely bespoke, your own design, you could design a structure like this and have it veneered as well. So again, these things will start to make more sense as we go through the different lessons as well. That would be incredibly an incredibly big project, a big task, if you were going to do something like this completely bespoke. And certainly not recommended for a novice designer. Wait until you've got quite a few jobs under your belt before you do something like that. But again, I just want you to get inspired and think about the different things that you can actually do. Okay, so we've looked at two types of walls there. We've looked at regular walls and irregular walls. And really, more often than not, even though there are 1,000,001 different things you can do with walls, you are going to be limited by time constraints, by budget, by the availability of good contractors, all of those things. But more often than not, you will end up being able to use small details. And these are the things that make a difference as well, and that make a difference between something that's being interior designed. So when you're putting a structure in place, don't, even if you can't do something that you really would like to go gung-ho and, you don't get that opportunity, these details can make all the difference. So things like niches, so look at this here. You can see here, here's the front of the cupboards. Okay, so there's cupboards there, there's a fridge there. Okay, there's the a wall there, which is probably hiding an air conditioning duct, heating and air conditioning, which is another giveaway is this little grill over here. And basically, the thickness of the wall, they've actually extended here on either here by creating this partition at the end. So as rather than having just, a narrow wall where you can see into here and into there, they've extended this wall and created a niche area as well. And things like this can really make a difference. This is really what, good interior design is all about as well. So, things like this for display areas. So I hope you can already start to see and start to envision how something like this is going to be constructed, because you've already understand how the framework is made. Okay, it's just a framework, and I'm going to show you this in a little bit more detail, how this is done behind it. But you should already start to have a picture in your head of how something like this is made. Another thing to think about, again, when you're designing walls is, what is their purpose? What is their need? Do you need, really start to think about, you don't always need to have a full height wall. You can have a half wall or a 3/4 wall. And things, that can be a really good way to make space open. A really nice thing in a bathroom, if it's a shared bathroom where a couple have a bathroom, a really nice thing to do is where the toilet is to have a low wall beside it, so that if somebody is on the toilet, whoever else is there doesn't see them. There's a few little things like that, but they're just little things that just make things a little bit more pleasant. Again, a low wall here, and there's all variety of reasons for doing things like this. One of the reasons as well is just, you can be very easily sometimes, glass and shower doors, shower enclosures with toughened glass can be very expensive to buy something that fits in exactly. Very often you may not be able to get something that fits in exactly the space that you're looking for. So very often it can be easy and relatively inexpensive to do something like this, to make your shower enclosure by designing like a dwarf wall, because having just a straight, and this is why I was saying to you before, look at the standard sizes. You need to start investigating what's available to you in your area. Okay, so toughened glass, you might be able to buy sheets of toughened glass that are XYZ measurement. Okay, if that's the case, ahead of time that you can easily make a shower cubicle. You can have it as wide as you want, because you're going to build a wall yourself. You're going to build this wall up to so height so that basically it houses and supports that piece of standard toughened glass. So I just hope it's starting to help you realize how all of this knowledge helps you to juggle things and come up with really good design solutions and bespoke design solutions, and how to get the maximum bang for your buck. I always say that as an interior designer, there's no way my clients could do that job. Not only do that job, whether or not they could come up with the designs themselves, but there's absolutely no way they could get the result that I get for them on the same budget. There's just no way. And I always feel that's something that I give extra value. And it's not about saving money, because I've worked with, very high budgets as well. But I also think that even when you're working with really high budgets and exclusive and expensive materials, it's about, making sure that, each detail is really well thought out, really well crafted. And more often than not, you will find yourself juggling different things and juggling, a budget in one area so that you can spend more in a different area. And these are the way that you can kind of look at things and combine things as well. So again, just even another little small detail here. Look, here you've got a low wall and just a curved wall here at the side of the bath. These are the things that make the difference. And this is what makes the difference between a normal interior and something that has been really, designed by an interior designer. A couple more ideas for inspiration. Again, just an inset wall. And here's another one here. And another thing as well is that, you can, again, you're mixing and matching with materials, different types of things as well. And this is also very practical for storage. Okay, so in areas like a bathroom where you want to have a space for you know toiletries, shampoo, conditioner, etc. It's a good thing to be able to do. They can either be open for display or they can be closed off. So it's something that you will see quite often. Now, I will tell you, a friend of mine recently had her bathroom renovated, and she had a builder walk off the job because she wanted something like this done. Oh, my mouse is going. There we go. Because the building contractor actually walked off and left her, and she was stuck without a bathroom while she found another contractor. And she managed, but she was just saying to me, "Oh my God, Maria!" And she's really this is a very, very good friend of mine. And I always say to her, Philippa, you're a designer. You don't realize you're a designer. And she meticulously plans everything. She really makes use of every single centimeter of space. She's a better designer than a lot of designers that I've met. And she's very, very good at what she does. She'll run things by me and kind of ask me for opinions. And, I only ever give it when it's asked for. But at the same time, she has really, really good ideas. And all she wanted was, a simple recess to make use of the space like this. And she just said to me, I can't believe, she rang me up in tears and said, this building contractor's gone. And I'm miles away at the moment. I'm living, about a 5-hour drive from London. So anyway, I did see her about 2 weeks later, and I was also saying to her, look, this is quite normal, unless you're working with, a contractor, they just don't like to do anything that's different. So it's a simple thing. She did get someone in and they did it for her, but just even something as simple as this can make a difference sometimes, but it makes a difference to the design, particularly in things like a bathroom where you're not going to have all these, the normal accessories that you would have because it's a functional room. You're not necessarily going to have your pictures or your lamps, whatever. So just thinking about those things. And again, sometimes you have to do things like this for a practical purpose. So, for example, if you're putting in kitchen units and you have a wide fridge or an extra large fridge and you want it to sit flush with the units, you may need to create an inset so that the wall, the fridge, freezer, etc., can go straight back into it and everything can sit flush. So the only way that you can do all this is by planning exactly how you're going to use the space and what you want in it. Okay. So how do you do a recess? Basically, this is it. Okay, I found these images online on a DIY site, and basically here's the niche. So you can see here is the there's the framework wall. You can see the insulation in it. And all that they've done is they just put this square frame in there. Okay. So basically this depth here is basically, they've just built the frame around it. So that's one area, obviously, where you don't see any insulation because it's just not there. And close-up detail. And again, these areas, this is notes because this is taken from a DIY website. But again, it's just talking about how to use the lumber, the plywood backing, etc., as well. But again, it's not rocket science. And, you've got the depth of space to be able to do something like that. So things like that can make all the difference. Another thing about this is kind of like if you ever have an obstacle, there are times when you need to house pipes, for showers in particular, you need to house the pipe work. So what can be very nice to do is like do an inset wall, like the thick wall at the side can hide the pipes. You've got an inset there with shelves, and then you bring out the thick wall again. They're just little things that you can do, but they make all the difference as well. So just some final inspiration for you, just to give you some different ideas and thoughts. And then another thing as well, just to give you one last thought, is about the finish. We've looked at kind of the structure. This is not structure. This is an applied finish, but it is a structural finish because this is like a plaster finish. Plasterboard. Plaster is a very messy material to work with. It gets everywhere, and so basically something like this, it's definitely considered structural work, and it's part of the building itself. But at the same time, this is something that's just applied, and just look at all of these ideas and take inspiration from everywhere. And the other last thing as well is, as I was saying there as well, see obstacles as an opportunity. So, I mean, this is just an image I found online, and look at this here, okay? I mean, this is a private swimming pool. You've got these areas here. Now, this is the structure of the building, okay? So basically, you can see there's a pillar. This is obviously a supporting column here, and there's this kind of like little recess area here. Everything is just tiled. I would see this as an opportunity to do something different. So when you see anything like this, don't just ignore it. This is the difference between good interior design. Again, this is just an image that I found relatively easily. But look, all of a sudden, there's something similar, and look, they've made it a feature. Now, what this falls into is finishing rather than structural. The finishing decorative details. But, do you think so? Look at things and take your inspiration from everywhere. And the actual construction and layout of a building, sometimes it's going to limit you, but sometimes it can actually lend itself to a much more interesting design as well. Okay, we are 8:10. I'm going to try and wrap this up. I'm going to try and get through this last bit in about 20 minutes here. Let me just see, did everyone join us as well? Yeah, okay. So any questions so far? How are we doing? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through movable partitions, and I'm not going to go through demountable partitions. I won't have time for that this evening. So I'm just going to stick to movable partitions. And what I'll try and do is make a short video. I'll try and make a short video in the next couple of days on demountable partitions as well. Sylvia says, all very inspiring. Okay. Well, I hope you're all only just quiet because you're being inspired and your minds are working overtime. And Moses says, most inspiring lesson today. Oh, wow, Moses. Thank you. Very good. Okay, good. Well, listen, I mean, this is the thing about construction. In all honesty, this could be a very dry subject, but if you're going to be working with interiors and doing different things like this, I want you to feel inspired about it. I don't want you to just think about, oh, this is what I do, and I just put out the framework and I do this, that, and the other, And I would really, really like you to use the opportunity on these projects that you're about to start as part of your kind of learning assignments as well, to do something creative, because this is a portfolio piece for you. I'm sorry, my vocabulary is disappearing at the moment. I'm going through a time of my life. I will say no more. I'm not going to, it's not to burn you with my problems, but it's driving me crazy. I think I said this to you a short time ago. When I was pregnant, I had no memory. I was like Dory, the fish in Finding Nemo. I walk into a room and can't remember what I've gone in for. And I'm doing this again. And apparently this is normal for the, the stage that I'm currently going through, but it is incredibly frustrating, and I find I have no vocabulary. I cannot find even simple words. So it's not that I've completely lost my marbles, although some people might disagree. But bear with me, because I'm very much aware. I've been like this for the last couple of months, and it is absolutely driving me crazy. But anyway, we get there. So what was I going to say now? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. For goodness sakes. So yeah, no, I just want you to be inspired. Yeah. And so when you're doing this piece, this project that you're going to do, think about something different like this as well, because more often than not, when you're doing a lot of interior designs, you will use your standard kind of run-of-the-mill typical wall structure. Okay, and that's fine. You'll be able to do things a little bit differently. You'll be able to make the best use of space. And if you are choosing regular walls, it'll be because you're doing that deliberately for practical reasons, not because you're limited by your imagination or your know-how. Okay, that's what I really want you to get from all of this. But I would use the opportunity to do something different for your project, because again, it can be a showpiece. And don't forget, this is going to be part of your portfolio. This will be something that you'll put yourself on your website, etc. And if you start to show things like that, then people will come to you for things like that as well. People will see a design that you've done and say, oh, I really like that. Maybe I could get you to do that for me. So use the opportunity as well. It may take you a little bit more work, but it's going to be fun. Thank you, Moses. My mind was going. Okay, guys. Right. So listen, we're going to talk about demountable and movable partitions now, and mainly movable. Now, demountable partitions, as I said, I'll try and make a video in the next couple of days, just a short video to cover that. But they're kind of wall systems that you kind of push into place, and you can take them down and move them away. And they're generally quite straight. Now, they can be curved, like the ones we looked at there. The curved glass wall partition, that's a demountable partition. In fact, let me go back, because I didn't find images for these just because we didn't have enough time. Okay, I'll show you very, very quickly. This is a demountable partition here. Okay, how these are made, basically, you have a framework and you put the frame, you attach it to the ceiling, you attach it to the floor, and then basically you slot these partition panels into place. Yeah, this is generally one large prefabricated panel. It slots into place. Okay, the framework is usually like a track that's made to hold this firmly in place, and then once it's put into place, then there's ways that you join the partitions, you seal them, etc. Now, the thing about this is, it's basically this sheet is wedged in between the floor and the ceiling. That's it, basically. So it doesn't form part of the structure of the building, and you can take it down. So you can remove this afterwards. You remove the track from the top and the bottom, and you just fill them. There might be a bit of repair work, but this is why it's called a demountable partition, because you can then take them and put them somewhere else, put them in another part of the building. Now, these are very commonly used in offices at the moment. Our offices in London, in Richmond, we have a serviced office there, and basically they have, lots and lots of different companies have offices there, and we all rent office space, and they use demountable partitions to reconfigure the space all the time. So if I want a space that only has 4 desks, or if I want a 6-unit space or whatever, they will change the walls to match. So you'll find them very widely used in things like that as well. So that's a demountable partition. Okay, what we are going to be looking at now are movable partitions. You'll find plenty of examples of demountable partitions. Now, and the difference as well, Sylvia asked a question about what is the difference between a sheet, a frame sheet and a frame panel system. The main difference is that a frame sheet is basically made with a solid piece. Oh, let me go back again here. I told you, I'm losing my mind. The main difference with frame sheet system is like something like this. Okay, this is a sheet. This is one large, well, it could be argued either way. Okay, this looks more like a panel, but a lot of these systems, okay, are made, this is definitely a sheet system. Okay, even though it's curved, it's a sheet system. It's one large singular piece, okay, that's pushed into place. That's a sheet system. It's one piece. A panel system is usually constructed with a few different pieces. That's really the difference. And again, don't get hung up on it. Don't get hung, different people, different manufacturers, products, manufacturers call things differently. The fact that it's a demountable partition is kind of like the most important thing. But there are wall paneling systems you can get that are very similar to this, But basically you make up a framework and then you slot all the pieces. Now this is definitely one piece, okay? But a paneling system would just be, see this here. See this detail here. This could be lots of different individual wall panels. Okay, so basically that would be a panel system rather than a panel sheet system, if that makes sense. And in fact, that's definitely what this is, because that's the only way that you could have something that could be completely configured for a particular space, for a particular shape and size. So that would be a frame panel system. Now, I didn't even think I had an image of that there. I wasn't thinking about that. So that is that. Let's go on and look at movable partitions, because they give you a lot more flexibility. So the thing about moving partitions, and again, this is where doors and walls overlap. But these really are, flexible. A door, generally speaking, is access from one area into another, whereas these are deliberately moving partition walls so that you can reconfigure space on a temporary, for a temporary purpose. You'll see these used a lot in hotels and kind of like areas where they house major events, so that they can break the large areas up into a series of smaller rooms. Okay, so this is one called the sliding folding system. Hold on a second. I made some notes and I need to get my glasses. Oh my goodness, the joys of all of... No, can't find them. Okay, well, let's hope I can read my own notes. Oh, my darlings. I'm not old, but I'm certainly not getting any younger. Okay, right. I must live somewhere else. So, okay. The thing about these is, what these are is they have top and bottom tracks. Okay, so you have to have, the structure. There'll be a track on top, a track on the bottom, and these you can see how these work. These are continuously hinged. Each panel is hinged and they fold back like an accordion. Okay, so typically you'll have this when you can get somewhere they're just supported above. Okay, we'll have a look at those in a minute. But sometimes, you don't have a strong enough structure. So very often you'll have to get these so that they're supported on the bottom as well. They have a low profile. The track on the bottom will carry a lot of the weight. Okay, and that's the main reason for having the top and the bottom tracks, because it's required, because the bottom track needs to support most of the weight of these. Okay, so they can be available as center or as completely folding. So when I say center, this can be opened in the middle. Okay, so there's a center opening here. You can divide them up whatever way you want to, or it could all go open to one side as well. So again, just a little quick diagram. So here's a single wing end folding, so you can see how that all goes back to the side there. This is a single wing. Oh yeah, sorry. This is a single wing center folding. So basically, this would be slightly different in that you can see the way that the panels are stacked up when they open, when they're open and close back. So they'll either encroach on one area of the overall area, or they can be in the center like this as well. There's another example here. So this is a residential. Again, you tend to see more of these in commercial applications, but you do still see some things like this in some residential designs as well. So these are available in a wide variety of different surface finishes. Okay, you will find a lot of these prefabricated, made to order, and they have different colors. They have different finishes. Like here we have glass. So, the panels can be finished with different, types of plastic, so that they're very clean for hospitals. school environments, that type of thing. Now, the only thing about them is that they're relatively heavy construction. They do need support. And the other thing about it is their level of acoustics is not going to be as strong as a solid wall. And then the other thing about that is, if you're going to have that one where you have a bottom and top and bottom track, the floor needs to be very level, so that because obviously it's going to be quite square and the floor needs to be level. So that may require additional work before you want to install something like that as well. Now, the next one that we have to look at is a basic sliding partition. Okay, this is with a top track only. Okay, and this is a residential application here. Now, the downside about something like this as well is that basically when you have it all pushed back to one side, there's always going to be a portion of this visible. So as in the other ones, they slide back completely like an accordion. They can close off and open up the space completely. Something like this, basically, this is split into two, three, so you've got three equal panels, so a third of the space is always going to be covered. So when the panels are pushed back to one side, you're always going to have some area blocked out there. So that's the downside of this one. Now, let me just say. Actually, these are very similar. I'm sure you've seen something like these in wardrobes as well, wardrobes and closets with sliding doors, where basically, that's something I find can be very restrictive. I'm in the house I'm in at the moment. The wardrobes have sliding mirrored wardrobes, and they're great. They're really functional, perfect. Good use of space, but I have to be honest, I hate the fact that they have these three sliding panels. Two of them are on one panel, two of them are on the same track, and one is on a separate track. So I have to kind of push all of them to one side if I want to get in somewhere, or then push them over. It's just, to me, I find that cumbersome. It's something that I would never design myself and put into an interior myself. But at the moment where I'm living, I'm going to be here. I'm not so sure how long I'm going to be here for, so I'm renting for a while, and yeah, it's just interesting. So that something like that would absolutely drive me crazy. But they're just things to be aware of as well. So again, here's another one, basic sliding partition, and again, how they slide back. Again, think about the number of tracks that you have as well, because as I said, with the wardrobes at the moment, this type of thing, because there's only got two tracks, I've got two panels on one track, one on another. However, something like that can be avoided if you have more tracks. But then again, that makes the actual depth, the overall depth of the structure more as well. And here's an example to show you again the different tracks. So here, this one here, we've got three tracks, 1, 2, 3. And how can you tell? You can tell here because you've got three different depths. They're not on the same track. So 1, 2, 3. Here you've got 4. Here you've got 3 tracks. So you've got this one track, which both of these are on, this track and this track. So there's 4 tracks here, there's 3 tracks here. And again, this means that basically how much space is going to be, you're never going to have less than 2/3. Okay, the smallest, even if we moved everything over to one side, okay, you're going to have 2 sheets beside each other. 2 sheets beside each other, and then 1 sheet. So basically, this, where my mouse is now, you can never have it more open than that. It's completely open because everything will be over here, but you won't have it more open. Okay, hope that makes sense. I'm sure it does. Okay, here's another one, sliding partition, top track only. And this is one that has a pivot as well, okay? So again, stacking and pivoting. Now again, things like this are It's just a matter of the way that, the hardware, the way they're designed, and the fixtures. Now, with these as well, because these are hanging basically from a top track, they need to be made of a very kind of lightweight structure. So generally speaking, they're made with kind of like a honeycomb product inside. So they do still have a heavy construction, but it's not going to be as heavy as basically the other ones that we looked at. And then the other thing about it is you need to make sure that the structure overhead is going to be strong enough to support it as well. There's a little thing here as well I just wanted to say as well, bolts that will hold these in place when they're closed, things like that will be very important just to add to the overall stability as well. Guys, I'm sorry. I knew this was going to be a long one. We're not doing too badly. We're nearly there, okay? Okay, so again, here's a sliding partition again. This is with your top track only. Now, again, this is kind of like a stacking and pivoting. This is just in a residential application. And again, you can actually see here. Now, the only thing about this is that if you want to go around corners, you need 2 tracks, okay? So this is just like different configurations that you can do to be able to go around corners. Now, the disadvantage of these as well is obviously you can't have curved configurations. You also can't have angles. Okay, because if they're moving, you can have a 90-degree angle. This can fold back here, and these can move over there, but you can't have a 45-degree angle. It's just, something that would have to be fixed in place. So do be aware that there are certain limitations on using these types of things. You either have to have a straight run, or you're going to be working with 90-degree angles. Okay. And there's another one, again, a sliding partition, top one only. When you are purchasing these things as well, a lot of them will come with, doors which go into them, etc., so that they're all flush and everything is just designed to, really create an absolutely streamlined finished. So I don't want to give you everything, there's nothing too much here to go on. It's just really the different options that are available and why you might go for them one over the other. Okay. Now, folding partitions. This is kind of similar to the ones we've just looked at, but again, these are different. Manufacturers will call them different things. Now, I wouldn't call this a folding partition. Okay, I would call this, the ones that we just looked at before. We looked at kind of, pivoting ones. That folded back. This is really the same as that for me. This, though, is what I would call a folding partition. Okay, for me, a folding partition is something that's much more flexible. It usually has some kind of fabric or textile on the outside, and it folds. It literally folds back. That's a difference between something here that moves along a track, where you've got a solid structure or a solid component that moves back along a track, and whether it slides or pivots and clicks into place, that's the difference. So again, this is where different manufacturers call them different things, and sometimes people will say to me, I'm confused because you've said that's a folding partition. Honestly, it's just what people will call different things. So don't get too hung up on the terminology. Terminology is helpful insofar as it gives you a good starting point, but just be aware of that and don't get caught on names. The overall kind of concept is the most important thing here to understand. So these are kind of accordion style folding partitions, and I'm sure you've all seen these as well, where basically, look, you can see here there's a track there, and basically it just pulls around, folds right back against the wall, opens the space, and can be pulled back around to close it as well. Again, they can be used in residential and commercial interiors. You don't see a lot of these, but where space is tight, they can be really, really good. I would think something like a studio apartment, where space is very limited. It's a door and an opening in one. If you have a very small bathroom or toilet, something like this comes as a door. So this is where these kind of subjects overlap a little bit, but just it's amazing sometimes how you can, you can look at these things and say, oh, that's not something that I'd like to use. But if it can make a functional space, and they can also be done, attractively as well, there's a lot of different options out there. Now, another thing as well is a ceiling suspended partition. Again, these are great. It's like gymnasiums, okay, which is what we're looking at here. These are in the ceiling, they're stacked away. It's basically like a blind, for want of a better description. I mean, if you just imagine, it's like a big roller blind that comes down, or a big Roman blind, more so, because basically it's pulled up, and it, you can even see the seams here, the lines here, because it folds up on itself, up on itself, up on itself, and then disappears into the ceiling. So it stacks away into the ceiling. So it doesn't encroach at all on the floor space. And this is mainly where you'd see these types of things. Now, again, you need to have a high ceiling for this. You need to have, something that can kind of support this type of component as well. And the high ceiling needs to be, because obviously there's going to be that stack away space as well. This is another one as well I came across recently called Skyfold, and it's very similar, but it actually folds up almost flat. So whereas the last one here, is a bit like a Roman blind, okay, even when it's closed, there's still going to be this depth, okay, of all of these different, you can see the seams here where they fold up. So if you imagine a Roman blind, it's going to be like that. It's going to have that depth. Whereas this new one, Skyfold, basically you can see they actually fold up relatively flat against the ceiling, certainly by comparison anyway. And what I really liked about this as well, I just thought was very clever, is that when they did lower this down, I mean, and there's nothing to stop you doing things like this as well. They've got advertising on the actual partition section as well, but it goes into horizontal folds. So just be aware of things. And when this is down, it looks like a frame panel system. Okay, so when this is in place, it actually looks like just a normal frame panel wall. So, what's really great about this as well is that, when it's away, it's completely unobtrusive. It opens up the space completely, and at the same time you can still have a very streamlined effect once it's actually been put down as well. Last one here, again, this is kind of a little bit like doors, individual pivoting panels where they just turn. So again, dividing the space, things like this can be, again, this is a residential application here, obviously. There's some amazing things that you can do, and really more than anything else, I just really want to be able to give you some inspiration and just think differently. And here is, I think this is my last image. Yes, it is. Okay, not too bad. An hour and a half, not 2 hours, guys. Sorry, I apologize. So this is another pivoting partition wall. And again, I like this one in particular. Look at this, okay? Because basically, when it's closed, this is made like of basically a framework, okay? You've kind of got these lats of wood. So even when they're closed, they allow the light to travel. But then, when they're open, it creates a feature within itself, but I like the way that this is done. So, space can be very tight nowadays. Depending on where you are in the world, most major cities are short on space. Most of the major cities, you spend a fortune to have good space. I've lived in London for 10 years. Love it there, actually, by the way. Absolutely love London. But the one thing is that you're always trying to make the best use of your space. And it's funny, I had quite a big house in London, but I had someone come over from the States and say, oh my God, your houses are so small. And I was laughing to myself thinking, God, when people usually say to me, oh my goodness, you have so much space, But again, it's by comparison. But again, if you were in New York City, you would have, very, very small space. I mean, I don't know, hotels there cost a fortune because, the space is just so expensive. So all of these flexible systems are, can be really, really important for you to divide up a space and do things. Again, there's a really good thing as well. I'm going to try and find this video. In fact, I thought about this the other day and then I forgot it. I'm just going to write down Tokyo. Right, listen, guys, what you can do, look up Tokyo on YouTube, Tokyo movable walls, okay? And I'll try and find it as well, but just Google it yourself, okay? And basically, it's an architect who had a studio apartment in Tokyo and how he designed these movable walls so that he has all of the functional areas of a home within a small space. And I just think, again, it's a really inspiring way of what you can do. So I'll try and find it and I'll send it out to you. And but if you wanted to go on and have a look now and get inspired, I would say you'll find it on YouTube. Just look up Tokyo movable walls and maybe put in studio. Well, that'll definitely pull it up. So, my lovelies, that is it. We are going to leave it there. We've covered the vast majority of what's in the lesson, but obviously you do need to go through the lesson yourself as well. Now, you have your first basic project. Now, I know that some of you won't have access to this yet because you won't. Sometimes you have, not all of you have submitted assignments just yet. So what I'll do is I'll email this to you. Even if you submitted one assignment, you may not have access to this. So I'll email this to you. I'll do it after I finish. I just need to go get something to eat first, but I'll make sure that I'll do it this evening. I'll come back and I'll do it afterwards. And this is your first project. So you have a choice, okay? You have a choice between doing a commercial interior or a residential interior. One is not easier than the other. Okay, but the first thing that you really need to do is start planning out your walls. How are you going to use your space? And that's really the thing. So with this project, this is a little bit like the apartment design that you did in stage 1 of the HND. And so you are only doing pieces with each lesson. Okay, so it needs to be in bite-sized pieces. So each lesson you just take on that part. So the part for this learning assignment is to plan your layout. You need to plan where your walls are going to be, but you obviously can't decide where your walls are going to be until you know how you're going to use the space. So it's kind of like 2 in 1. Now, again, you can use fairly standard measurements while you plan your layout. Afterwards, unless you really want to go gung-ho at this point and say, oh, I'm going to do everything bespoke. But I would say, use fairly standard measurements first of all. If I'm going to have a seating area, if I'm going to have this type of area here, if I'm going to have an office, if you're going to do the office, use, standard measurements to help you plan your space and your layout. And use that then to decide your walls. So, and then the other thing about it is you've been asked to contribute a guest blog to an interior design magazine about flexible internal partitions. Actually, I do have a couple more slides. I forgot I added this in. Mira asked me, because I put in feedback about, just think about the idea of taking it as a blog. So I just found an example here to bring on to you. This subject can be quite dry, honestly. All of construction can be dry, but it shouldn't be because it gives you so much opportunity to do so many things with an interior. So, a lot of the content, even in the lessons on materials, some of the content is quite dry because we're required to cover very specific things by the accreditation. But, I want you to really be inspired. And when you're completing your assignments, think about how you can use them to not just demonstrate your learning, but also to inspire others. So here's an example of one student. Now, I've just taken kind of half of what they did. And this is their thing about walls, okay? So they've had the introduction page. Here you've got a table with, a nice comparison. Again, brief description here. I like here, there's a lot of content here, but it's made visually pleasing. Little, details here in description. A lot of you are doing things like this anyway, description of demountable partitions. But for those of you who aren't sure, I just thought I would show you this as well. The difference between, again, taking your work, just completing the assignment and really kind of going the extra mile and, really illustrating, putting something together, and putting something together that you can get for your own use. I'm always, always thinking, how can you get maximum use out of your work? Not just by completing the assignment, but long term. And if you can put something like this, if you can create something that you can put on your website as a blog post or a giveaway, something like that, it also helps to kind of like establish you as a credible expert with these types of things as well. So that's really it. Someone was saying to me, Mira was actually asking me, what do you mean when you talk about, maybe format something like a blog post, something like this. Okay, just something that's a little bit more user friendly. It's taking information. What I will say to you is two things also that I want to mention. Don't just copy stuff from the internet, okay, or from a product brochure. You need to word things in your own language, okay? So I'll know. I'll know if you've just copied something, okay? So don't do that. Make sure that you reframe things and put things in your own wording. And the other thing about it is, I would, demonstrate your knowledge. This in itself will help you to learn and consolidate all of this information. And as I said, if you can present it in a way that will be able to give you long-term use in the future as well, it will help to establish your credibility. So for the moment, you're meant to be doing a guest blog on an interior design magazine. This could be something that could certainly qualify as that, and it's something that could be downloaded and given to people as well. So that's it really. I am going to send you the assignments later on, probably about another hour. I'll send you, I'll look up the YouTube video on Tokyo. I've just made a note here when I come back, but look it up yourself as well if you can't wait. Otherwise, I'll do that when I come back as well. And we have then our next one is in, I believe it's 2 weeks, 29th. Yeah, 29th of November. That's 2 weeks. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So next week, 22nd, we have a week in between, which is, we've Thanksgiving in between. So those of you who are celebrating Thanksgiving, enjoy. And when we come back, we'll have wood and stone. Now, this is quite a amount of a lesson because obviously before you design your wall layout, you've obviously got to design your actual layout. So there is quite a bit to this assignment as well. So if you need anything to come back to me, let me know, email me. But I know that you're all using each other on WhatsApp as well. So keep that going as well. And that's it. I will leave you in peace. Moses says, okay, thanks for letting me know that, Moses, because I thought I had everything up to date. I'll go on. You're most welcome. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Sorry again about last week, but we're back on track now. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening. And I am off now to enjoy my dinner. Take care, guys.